Marvelous hello, friends and loved ones, and welcome back to even more indie games inspired by Megami Tensei. As always, this means a game where I have a confirmed statement from someone involved with the game saying that SMT, or Persona, or whatever inspired the game in some way. I've loved playing these games, I've loved seeing what these developers make with their inspirations, so without dilly-dallying, I'm back with 5 more titles that fall into this very specific niche that I really like talking about. The only thing I do want to clarify up front is I was able to get codes for every game I'm talking about today, but that fact in no way influenced what I have to say here. Alright, let's just get things started. The first game I want to talk about today is Siren's Call Escape Velocity. This is a visual novel that was successfully funded on Kickstarter and whose prologue on Steam says, "Inspired by games like Persona 4, Higurashi, and Doki Doki Literature Club, Siren's Call Escape Velocity is a tropical cocktail of delicious summertime dread." I played the prologue for this game last summer, gushed about how much I loved it on Twitter, and the dev reached out to me to send me an advanced copy of the full game. The title eventually went into early access late last year and fully launched in January of 2025, but I've basically been sitting on this one and been eager to talk about it for almost a year now. Not to give too much away in advance, but this is one of the most incredible, engaging, and immersive VNs I've ever played, and I absolutely loved it. Okay, maybe that did give away a bit too much, but alright, what is Siren's Call Escape Velocity? Well, if you've played Persona, we're all familiar with the classic trope, right? A young man temporarily staying in a small town with nothing to do accidentally stumbles upon a portal to another world. This world, full of beings called Sirens, appear to be the cause of the negative emotions for the town's citizens. The young man and his friends traverse the dangerous world and use the power of their awakened other selves, their muses, to defeat the Sirens and bring peace and contentment to the townsfolk. Congratulations, heroes! You won! Now all that's left is for our stoic protagonist to say his final goodbyes to the dear friends who fought alongside him before he leaves town tomorrow. And that is where our story begins. Siren's Call Escape Velocity is an amazing visual novel experience full of lovable characters, unique situations, fantastic artwork, and a plot that leaves you infinitely curious as to what's happening and what you need to do. The game officially starting on what is basically the denouement of a modern Persona game lets players put the pieces together themselves as to what's happened over the past several months. The game obviously uses its framework to set up a Persona-like world, and despite you never once engaging in the dungeon-crawling, RPG battles, or social link-esque mechanics, you can absolutely see how it would all fit into an actual game like that. Instead of diving into a TV or using a navigation app, the Midnight Guard enters the Sirens' world through a locker at their school. Instead of chilling at the food court or meeting up at LeBlanc, they hang out in their friend Judy's living room. The sense of world building for an RPG that you never actually get to play is impressive, and you can read through the protagonist journal to learn more about the adventures they've been on, and get a feel for the mechanics of a game that, again, we never actually get to play, but by reading through it, you'd swear that you already had. It gives us a Persona-esque world, and then follows through on the actual impact of that type of an event on both our heroes and the world that they fought so hard to save. It creates a unique and unsettling atmosphere, made even creepier and likely smelling of dead fish and meth by the entire story being set in Florida, while maintaining an engaging message, and I found myself really caring about these characters and wanting to see good things happen to them, even when it seemed like that was not going to be the case. Our main character is Oliver, a seemingly quiet young man who takes on the role of the leader of the group. Then you've got your right-hand man, the sophisticated and learned Emile, the twin sisters, Judith and Andy, the tough guy with a softer side, Ashton, and finally the purple-haired artist, Violet, whom Oliver formed a romantic relationship with over the summer, despite her having a falling out with the rest of the party. The earliest chapter of the game is all about saying your final farewells to these characters and getting some one-on-one time with them, but through happenstance you're not able to get out of the town when you're supposed to. Violet notices that since defeating the Sirens, Oliver is acting peculiar, more quiet, like he's just sort of reacting to what other people are saying instead of engaging in conversation with them. Is it possible that destroying the other world wasn't the best option? Did we truly do what was best for everybody? Early in the game, Oliver is able to break away from this pre-designated role of being the leader and is free to just be himself, someone who is occasionally candid and not going to hold back on speaking his mind, essentially turning him from a silent JRPG self-insert protagonist into a much more fleshed out character. Siren's Call knocks on the fourth wall without actively trying to break it. There's no moment where you need to open up the files and delete character.png to progress the story, but there are moments where it does something like bringing up the peculiarity of your social links standing outside of a single spot all day on the off chance that you show up and decide to use your afternoon slot to spend time with them. Also, quick side note with Oliver, remember how I've complained about some protagonists in some of these games being just a bit too plain? Like, look at this guy. He's a skinny dude from Florida with short brown hair. But some of his poses, and yes, a simple t-shirt logo, can go a long way to making the character feel more engaging. Yes, it's a very simple graphic tee, but that plays into his personality, and the message it conveys feels right at home with the world and story. After breaking free, Oliver is basically stuck in a loop of having to say goodbye to his friends, but each day offers something different. Characters may be acting odd, or do something out of character, and over time, some of your friends seem to drop off the face of the earth entirely, which puts pressure on you to try and figure out what's going on. Where Siren's Call shines is that it's a visual novel that sets out to prey on your anxieties, and have you constantly asking yourself, wait, was that the right thing to say? While simultaneously creating the sensation that the very idea that there's a right thing to say is a flawed and somewhat problematic belief system to begin with. If you're the type of person who frequently Googles Persona 4 Moon Social Link because you forgot which dialogue choice on the first prompt of Rank 3 awards the most points, then this game already knows exactly how to get inside your head. The thing is, being a visual novel, I obviously don't want to spoil too much here, as the narrative is the most engaging element of the experience. I will say, though, that I really enjoy the game's art style. The character portraits all look great, and the music does a nice job of setting the atmosphere. You can unlock a lot of artwork in the gallery by making specific choices or unlocking certain events. One thing I love is getting to see what everybody's muse actually looks like. Despite how many games I've covered that claim to be inspired by Persona, we really don't see too many Persona equivalents, so this was nice, even if they're never part of the story that we play. Another thing that I think really stands out in this game are the backgrounds, which all resemble these, dry, cracking paintings, which fits into Violet's role as an artist and gives it a good visual flair. If I had to bring up a specific complaint that I have about Siren's Call Escape Velocity, it's that it has this bad habit of dipping its toes into the actual psychological horror aspects, only to quickly yank them back out and just decide to go home for the day. There are several moments where the world starts to slowly shift around you, and when you're starting to get really uncomfortable and wondering which of your poor decisions led you to this exact moment, the game just suddenly jerks back to reality as if to say, well, that was fun, wasn't it? Moving on. Aside from the main story, there are some fun, unlockable scenes that take place during the RPG section of the timeline, and these serve as a great opportunity to see characters interacting with one another in a more lighthearted and character-driven way. Among these scenes is one of my favorite lines in the entire game. The game even comes with an entire mini-visual novel starring Violet that you can unlock, which has way more meat on its bones than I was expecting. I should also mention there's a free-to-play story set in this world and still starring Oliver and exploring his home life called Sunflower Pie. It's pretty short and free and delightfully creepy, and it works as a good companion piece to the rest of this world. I understand that it may sound bizarre at first to set an entire visual novel after the big exciting RPG adventure that happened off-screen, but trust me, it works incredibly well and it makes sense. I really, truly, absolutely loved Siren's Call Escape Velocity. I've recommended it to so many people who have all told me how much they enjoyed it, so seriously, this is a story I just want more people to know about and experience. It's just so good. And I'm happy to say that on April 15th, 2025, the Pensword, developer of the game, announced that Siren's Call Second Wind is also happening. So do yourself a favor and play Escape Velocity so you can look forward to this sequel as much as I am. We've got a look at a new character named Ruth, and not a whole lot else to go on, but I'm excited to check it out when it eventually drops. Hey, real quick, if you like what I'm doing on this channel, please consider commenting, subscribing, maybe even checking out the Patreon. Trust me, it all helps and it makes a big difference. Thanks, let's move on. The next game I'm looking at is Sorry We're Closed, which came out on Steam in November 2024, but recently came to modern consoles in spring of 2025 with a slew of awesome updates. Anyway, this game is really weird, and gay. Like, super gay. And that is probably the only time you'll ever hear me refer to anything that way, because now that I've done so, allow me to gush about how much I absolutely adore this title. But first, how's it eligible, right? Well, I stumbled upon a tweet from the developer, Alamode Games, a few months before the title came out, where they posted, "Me sitting over here with my aesthetically SMT-inspired survival horror indie game." And, fun fact, they even admitted Kaneko's art style was a huge inspiration for the character designs. Like, I can see it, Marty definitely got that Kaneko eyeliner going on. But, alright, as the tweet pointed out, Sorry We're Closed is a survival horror indie game. The game has an intentional late PS1, early PS2 aesthetic that does a lot of heavy lifting with textures. I find the character designs and the game's distinct use of color absolutely breathtaking, whether it's the vibrant bright blue and pink of our protagonist Michelle, or the surprisingly pleasant and hauntingly liminal space of the hotel. The plot of Sorry We're Closed focuses on the aforementioned Michelle, who works in a convenience store around the corner from her crappy apartment. Or should I say flat, I'm pretty sure this game is British. Her life sucks, because 3 years ago her girlfriend dumped her and went off to become an actress on some lesbian soap opera that just, like, everyone seems to love. So one night she's minding her own business when a large demonic entity known as the Duchess is like, "Hey, you in the puffy pink jacket, love me," and curses Michelle with a third eye that allows her to shift her view between the human realm and the demon realm. And now she has to come to terms with the fact that about 3/4 of the people she knows in her neighborhood are actually celestial beings in some form. The dancer you know from the club? She's an angel. That friend of yours you chat with at the record store? Yeah, they're a non-binary demon with legs for days. Like, seriously, oh my god, Robin is so freaking hot. The super sweet guy who runs the diner? He's actually human, but don't worry, he's cool. I really like the cast of characters in this game, like the rat demon who delivers otherworldly mail, or how the guy who runs the club has his Cerberus goons by his side, but they still manage to be good boys. There's everything from massive eyesores to this bizarre crow beanbag thing called the Dream Eater. Like, seriously, I loved this dude. He was so polite when he decided to try and kill me. Oh yeah, and there's also your shopkeeper, who buys artifacts for Yauzas, this game's currency, while selling you general upgrades, and he's, well,
a goddamn lamb man!
Yeah, I know he's a goat, but I wanted to use that clip, okay? Each day has you roaming the streets of your quaint little neighborhood and speaking with characters, making progress in their specific quest lines, or just seeing what certain people have been up to. I really like these sections because they give you a good opportunity to check in on people and have some downtime from the survival part of survival horror. Getting close to specific characters and helping them out is what can help you unlock one of the game's main endings, where you side with certain characters and trust their lead on how to handle your situation. Given that the game compared itself to SMT, I'd say it reminds me the most of the reason paths in Nocturne, where it's more about using your specific abilities to carry out their ideals. It works really well, but certain endings are definitely harder to get than others, which is good since it encourages repeat playthroughs. After you're done socializing around your neighborhood, you head to one of the game's dungeons, like the subway station or a nearby aquarium, which, by the way, is a surefire way to get on my good side. I adore aquariums. Once here, you fight off demons while exploring memories of other victims who fell under the same curse as you, getting glimpses into how they thought they could escape from the Duchess, while ultimately trying to get their third eyes to help strengthen Michelle enough to potentially break the curse on her own. As you can see, the game utilizes a fixed third-person camera, which works insanely well for the survival horror genre. Like, this has always been my preferred style for this type of game. But that doesn't mean I didn't find myself trying to nudge the right analog stick every now and then to get a better view in certain spots. Combat in Sorry We're Closed is interesting. Whether you're using your super cool axe or your gun, you take down hostile demons. Your two main options are fighting them in the standard realm, where you can hit them anywhere but do way less damage, or in the realm of your third eye, to reveal their weak points where you have to hit those, but for way more damage. Activating third eye will briefly stun enemies, and like in many survival horror games, sometimes this is just useful to slip by enemies rather than engaging them. One thing I never got used to is that whether it's in the third eye perimeter or not, you can only attack by entering the designated first-person mode. And even well into the game, I'd still find myself just trying to swing my axe from the hip, only for the attack button to not do anything. A little thing that this game does that I absolutely love is that healing items are just water. Like just fresh, clean water. I can't explain why, but in the genre full of green herbs, syringes, or entire gallons of orange juice, there's just something I appreciated about water being what makes you feel better. While the original quote I pulled mentioned SMT, and many other reviewers and videos have made a Persona comparison, there are many ways where it feels like the main Atlas game they took some cues from was the non-Megaten title, Catherine. The main recurring theme throughout Sorry We're Closed is love, and it's told in a mostly mature and adult way. Whether it's the fallen demons that desire a return to God's love, the Duchess's warped views of love, or how different characters try to mend, repair, or just stabilize their own relationships, it's very emotionally gripping. With a unique cast that explores so many elements of sexuality, gender identity, and even ideals about whether a human can date a demon, or what happens when demons date angels, it's all just kind of a mess, but a beautiful, engaging one that I really appreciated. Nobody is perfect, nobody knows what they're doing, and we're all just trying to get by while holding on to these ideals of what love means to us and how it can fit into our lives. I feel like I've said this in every video I've done in this series, and several times outside of it, but Megami Tensei is a franchise that I firmly believe could work with any genre. So seeing a dev make a retro survival horror experience that's also loaded to the brim with an engaging story, characters, and memorable elements of demonology and Judeo-Christian symbols was just such a breath of fresh air. I feel like this is normally when I'd say something unhelpful, like, it's not for everyone, but the fact that it's not is what makes it stand out so much. Sorry We're Closed knows exactly what it is, what it set out to do, and how to carve its own identity in a way that helped it garner near universal acclaim, including from me, because this title was just fantastic. Speaking of horror games with Megami Tensei influences, the next game I want to look at is Liminal Void by J-Star. This game came out on Steam in August of 2024, but received a massive update in March of 2025, where the dev described this 1.1 release as essentially the game I wanted to make, so that's pretty cool. For a good while, this was just one of those games where I was seeing other people make the Megaten comparisons, but wasn't finding much from the developer. So I reached out and just asked them straight up, to which they responded, yeah, it's definitely early SMT inspired. Before development, I played Strange Journey. There are also influences from the first game, since they were RPG horror. It's a blur now, but SMT had a certain badassery and confidence in it that I really like. But while Sorry We're Closed went for the retro, slower, subtle survival horror, Liminal Void takes a different approach. This game is fast-paced, chaotic, frantic, and a lot of the fear comes from this overwhelming, bizarre sensation of doubting what your own senses are telling you, and just trying to maintain your composure as you get through each run. Even from the main menu, I'm bombarded by all these weird options, like faces, or whether or not we hate dogs. The story goes that humanity is on the verge of another apocalypse because the Liminal Layer, a realm separated from ours filled with forgotten gods and monsters, is blending into reality. However, an organization called the Liminal Layer Society can enter the void and fight these beings, even if their souls have to die again and again and again to do it. In Liminal Void, you can play as one of 4 characters, and fitting with the themes of horror and struggles, your characters are essentially some of the worst of what humanity has to offer. There's Gary, a terrorist, Helena, a serial killer, Sawain, a billionaire, and Minerva, a YouTuber. Now, you'd think that you'd learn about your favorite character by playing as them, but Liminal Void doesn't care what you think. You actually have to choose a partner on top of your playable character to act as your companion, and that's who you're going to learn more about when you get to one of the game's safer social floors and get a chance to talk to them. Although possibly keeping in themes with the chaotic nature of this world, I feel like I'd often say no to a character joining me, only for the game to be like, okay, they're with you, moving on. I often found myself unable to tell what was the game not working properly and what was the game intentionally messing with me. The general idea of Liminal Void is that you have to run around different levels of the layer and collect these floppy disks called sigils, which you also need to cast spells. Each character has access to one of the 4 elements, fire, force, blood, or light, and you can use the spells of your character and your partner character. You can unlock certain locked doors by attacking them with a specific type of magic, and you may also need to pick up batteries for your flashlight, which serves as your mini-map. In an overly simplified sense, you just want to grab as many sigils as you can and make your way to the portal to the next layer as soon as possible. Liminal Void has a very interesting take on the philosophy of get good, because yes, you're going to die a lot in this game. You die from a single hit, and nearly everything wants to kill you, from dogs that chase you down, to enemies that only move when you're not looking at them, to these random skulls that just kill you because lol why not, to even just not being able to find the portal and running out the timer. However, death doesn't mean you start your run over. It actually forces you later into the game and takes away your sigils, making you weaker and less prepared for the harder enemies the game is throwing at you, so you're more likely to keep dying. You can even get to the final floor of the game and deal with the final bosses with basically nothing. Then you can die again and enjoy your bad ending because you're a sucky suck who sucks before trying again. Throughout the game, there are a few safe checkpoint levels. These give you a chance to talk with your companion character or interact with someone new to mix things up. The only other character besides your four heroes is this robot cat thing that's your direct connection to the LLS, who often has vague, cryptic, or downright unhelpful things to say, but still adds a lot to the game's atmosphere, world building, and can help flesh out your player character a bit more. It's a brief respite from the fast-paced dungeon crawling, and I genuinely liked learning a bit more about these characters throughout my runs. It's cool to get to these floors and see how the other party members interact with your chosen protagonist, as the relationship dynamic between the characters are drastically different. For example, Helena hates men and exclusively killed them, so naturally she's a lot friendlier to Minerva. And once you're back in the liminal layer, you never really know what you're gonna find either. On one of my runs, I ended up on top of the maze and worked my way over to a stage where Gary was wearing a maid outfit, which actually makes it the second game I'm talking about today to have unlockables that feature a male protagonist in a maid outfit, which, let's be real, is pretty awesome. That's right, Oliver from Siren's Call Escape Velocity, don't think I didn't see you. I tried out a few runs of what the game calls Canon Mode, which is the level of difficulty and chaoticness that the developer intended, but I will admit I did drop it down to the Chill Mode just to see if I could actually beat it and try to give my eyeballs a bit of a break. Turns out, no. Even if I got to layer 444 with a fair amount of sigils, I'd still get overwhelmed and immediately die before I could even figure out how to properly select the spell I want to use. But again, the idea is that with enough runs, you can get good enough to pull it off. And I'll admit that by my 4th or 5th run, I was feeling a lot more comfortable with the game, even if I still made the occasional rookie mistake. To dust off that useless phrase again, Liminal Void isn't for everyone, and that's what gives it such a unique identity. I really like the characters and a lot of the story elements, but as someone who admittedly has terrible reflexes, horrible anxiety about time limits, and gets motion sickness, a lot, easily, this isn't one I see myself going back to very often, but I do want to stress that is not the fault of the game itself. Much like Sorry We're Closed, what Liminal Void sets out to do, I'd argue it does very well, and I highly encourage fans of this type of frantic, speed-based challenge and horror to seek the title out and judge it on a level that I don't think I'm really capable of. Because I feel like I'm basically sitting here going, well, it made me nauseated, gave me a headache, and has me checking under my bed for monsters, but you know what, I really liked the character dynamics, those were so good. Oh yeah, also, gotta throw this out, the soundtrack is just loaded with bangers. Like seriously, I cannot stress enough how much I loved the music in this game. And before we move on, I do also want to point out that despite the big Liminal Void update happening quite recently, J-Star's next title, Landmine Princess, should be coming out around this time. This is a dark dating sim with a similar chaotic energy to Liminal Void, only now you're trying to date a Jirai K-girl, and with 32 endings, only 8 of which are confirmed happy ones, you're definitely going to have to be careful about what you say and do on this journey. And even this title is apparently just a lead-in to an upcoming Landmine girlfriend, so be on the lookout for that as well if it sounds interesting to you. Okay, so this next game has some pretty interesting history to it. Remember all the way back in the very first indie games inspired by Megami Tensei, I talked about an engaging SMT-esque DRPG called Advent Crossroad that took place in a mall, and I also mentioned the Etrian Odyssey inspired follow-up, Core Crossing, while hinting that a third title was announced, but was shifting in progress due to the developer, Nankata, now working with a publisher. The earliest version of that third game was going to be called XYZ Crossing, and it looked like this, based on the few screenshots and trailers I was able to find online. The eventual update to this story is that Nankata sold the original engine to Gummy Bytes, who used it to make their own project in a similar style called Makai Agito, which is what we're looking at today. This game came out on March 27th, 2025, the same day that Raida Remastered: The Mystery of the Soulless Army was announced, which is really funny to me since this fresh title is a first-person DRPG with the devs tweeting that it's a game inspired by OG SMT Devil Summoner and Soul Hackers. And you know me, I love it when these Megaten-inspired indies draw from other series in the franchise. You play as Shinichi Bono, a journalist who heads to a former colleague's hometown to help them investigate a bizarre case. In this town, an event called the Witching Hour takes place every 13 years. During this time, the town becomes distorted, monsters called the Arcane roam free, cameras and recordings don't work, and when it's all over, no one remembers anything that happened during it until their memories return during the next one. Your colleague, Daigo, lost his parents 26 years ago, and you team up with a teacher named Rin who lost a close friend during the one 13 years ago. The story goes that a witch named Lady Rizuli cursed this town, and in order to break the spell once and for all, they'll need to destroy her 5 severed body parts before the witching hour ends. You explore winding dungeons, learn more about the curse, team up with more characters including a hot nun, and just try to save the town. Premise-wise, I love this. I'm a huge fan of small-town, spooky ghost story, folk horror stuff, and despite the Devil Summoner inspiration, I like that it leans into that narrative realm over the cyberpunk stuff. The game establishes everything you need to know very quickly. Your characters can fight the arcane because they have these books called grimoires that can house the creatures. You don't get to use the monsters directly in battle, but it works similarly to Soul Hackers 2, where each character equips one arcane that determines what spells they have and their elemental affinities. And look, I understand that a lot of these Megami Tensei inspired indies aren't going to appeal to all Megaten fans. Heck, this is the first RPG I'm talking about today. But let me say this, Makai Agito might just be the most Megami Tensei-esque Megaten-inspired indie that I've ever played, for better or worse. Most of the arcane are classic mythological figures that you're definitely familiar with if you're a Megaten fan, like Mothman and Pixie, while others are more extinct, like the Teru or...
Can I offer you a nice egg in this trying time?
You can negotiate with them in battle to get them to join you, but it's sort of a unique system where you just choose what you want to give them and hope it was enough to convince them. You can eventually fuse them together to make new arcane and select what spells they inherit during this process. Like, Makai Agito basically is a Megaten game. I feel like for a lot of people, this is a title that's gonna bring up the question of when an inspiration starts to fall into rip-off territory. I can't really say that Makai Agito is doing too much new, but I also feel like that's easier to forgive when it's doing most things right. The monster artist from Advent Crossroad is back, and if you'll recall, the creature designs were one of my biggest praises for that title, even if some of the designs in this game are definitely a bit too derivative for my liking. Look, I think the game is perfectly fine, but I'm not gonna sit here and try to be like, nuh-uh, this is a completely different orange pentagram with a singular wide blue eye named Decarabia. As someone who plays a lot of these Megaten-inspired indies, Makai Agito is kinda comfort food for me. It's like heading down to your local diner and just getting a burger and fries. You know, it's not the most extravagant or interesting burger and fries out there, but it's good and it's filling and it delivers on what it promises. When I was speaking with Nankata about this game, they said a big part of it was feeling like Soul Hackers 2 didn't capture what they specifically liked about the original Soul Hackers, so Gummy Bytes wanted to make a title that did, and I can certainly respect that. If you found yourself feeling the same way about Soul Hackers 2 and just want a solidly built dungeon crawler that wears its Megaten inspirations on its sleeve, you could do a lot worse than Makai Agito, so give it a shot and see for yourself. And our last game for today is actually the most recent one on this list, Mirrored Soul from Mammoth Plant, which launched in April 2025. You know, something I love about making these videos and finding new games is I often stumble upon things that I'd have never been able to tell you I wanted, but as soon as I play them, I'm like, why yes, I did want a Megami Tensei inspired detective story that's basically a demon-filled Who Framed Roger Rabbit with surreal mirror dimensions. The dev has never shied away from the title's Megaten inspirations, but I'm a fan of this tweet from about 5 years ago where they simply said, I figure I'll post updates on my SMT clone on this account. It's called Mirrored Soul, and it's about a detective and stuff. The detective in question is named Cecil, and the "and stuff" involves him getting roped into a bizarre case to track down an escaped baseball player who went on a murderous rampage. The game really leans into the cop cliches hard, with a disgruntled chief who didn't want to call Cecil back into the fray because he's a loose cannon, but dang it, he gets results. I'm not bad-mouthing the game for that because I loved it, especially within the context of a demon-filled RPG adventure. In the course of his investigation, Cecil enters a mirror world where he teams up with his wacky, mismatched buddy cop partner, a one-eyed cat demon called Spot. As the two explore the City of Valor, they stumble upon different mirrors that can take them to different kingdoms, and encounter demons along the way for protection and to aid them in battle. Mirrored Soul has a very unique take on the negotiation system to get new demons, because every single monster in the game has their own distinct recruitment criteria. Some you have to outsmart, some you have to bribe, some you just have to convince you're as big of a jerk as they are. One of my favorites is Slava, this lava slug that basically just requires you to sit through...
Have you ever had a dream that
Some are definitely head scratchers though. Like, I wanted to recruit this guy, but he's all like, beat me and we'll talk, but both choices just bring you back to the battle. Okay, so maybe if I defeat one, the next one I talk to will acknowledge that I beat him. No? Alright, well, maybe in this fight where there are two of them, one will join me if I beat the other one. Okay, no. Well, let's see, he says hand-to-hand combat, so maybe I actually need to equip and use a fist-based weapon. I don't have footage of that, that's literally something that only occurred to me right now as I was writing this. But it's that level of thinking and actual, well, detective work that made me really appreciate Mirrored Soul's negotiation system. On one hand, I really like this, because unlike SMT, Mirrored Soul does a good job making each monster feel like distinct characters, with their own personalities, hopes, and dreams, instead of just being a general personality type. On the other hand, I found that this aspect made it a lot harder to fuse them or get rid of them, because them being distinct characters with their own personalities, hopes, and dreams, instead of just being a general personality type, meant I got a lot more attached to them as characters. This is also a minor complaint, but I think there are way too many demons in this game that resist normal attacks. And by the way, if there's a demon that's weak against normal attacks, even if you like them, it's probably not a good idea to use them, because they are likely to regularly get their butts kicked, because enemies in this game actually seem smart enough to take advantage of weaknesses when they can. The combat itself is perfectly fine. Cecil and up to 3 demons use a range of attacks and spells to beat up foes. An element I like is that you gain experience as soon as you take down an enemy, meaning you and your demons, even the ones in your stock, can level up in the middle of battle. An element I don't like in this game, or any game that does this, is that reaching a high enough level means enemies of a certain level just no longer reward you with any experience at all. I get that the game doesn't want you to just grind all your problems away, but I've never been a fan of that mechanic. While the elements basically have a simple, super effective or not very effective tell that's nicely choreographed by the look of the number font when you do damage, one of the main systems of combat is the combo system. When your character's combo meter fills up, you can time a button press to basically get an extra free action. You'll often chain these together with your other party members, giving you a chance to rack up a lot of damage really quickly, so I recommend learning how to best utilize these free turns as you play. Cecil and Spot's investigation into finding good hands leads to some very distinct and interesting locations. Like, the Forest Kingdom has a giant medieval castle in it ruled over by a cruel king, or the Sun Kingdom, which currently has no sun, is under the thumb of Lizen P. Slander. And just like that, I'm in an Ace Attorney game, although I suppose Cecil does resemble Gregory Edgeworth. The dialogue and characters go a long way to making this game memorable, and I really liked the juxtaposition between a rundown noir city and the magical kingdoms in the mirror worlds. Also, I'm just a huge fan of the pause menu. Like, each one of your detective tools represents one of your menu options, like your party or equipment and stuff, and that's just a neat visual thing that I really liked. Speaking of design, I am a pretty big fan of how this game looks. It uses a somewhat minimalistic approach, but everything feels very nicely conveyed. I will say this though, and this is purely personal preference, I do kinda wish there'd been facial sprites or something when the characters are talking, just to add a little bit more expressiveness or animation to what are mostly static conversations. The monsters are definitely where the game's design shines the brightest though, and as I mentioned, they all feel very distinct in personality, and their design stood out as well. There was just something exciting about not knowing what you were going to run into in the next world, and what sort of social interaction you're going to wind up having with them. Overall, Mirrored Souls is a perfectly solid RPG. It leans on a few tropes, but it does them well. Its inspirations are clear, but in a way that feels distinct and gives the title its own identity. I'm a huge fan of detective stories and stuff, so it especially tickled me for that. This is an indie RPG that I can recommend to fans of any monster collecting RPGs, not just Megaten. Alrighty, and that's 5 more indie games inspired by Megami Tensei that I can recommend and think you should all check out. I've left links to every one of these games in the description. Not to sound like a broken record in these wrap-up sections, but I've truly loved working on this series of videos. It's been really fulfilling to combine my love of Megaten with my excitement at checking out indie games, and I'm really grateful and thankful to the devs who work hard on them and give me a chance to check them out and share them with all of you. If you know of any Megami Tensei inspired indie games, please let me know about them in the comments, and if you're a developer working on one, definitely let me know about that. I am always on the hunt for more titles in this specific niche to add to my spreadsheet, and I'll be back with videos in this series and more games to look at down the road. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you next time, so until then, take care.